Need a break from The Walking Dead? Let's see what The Girl with All the Gifts is about. The Girl with All the Gifts takes place in a dystopian zombie apocalypse future, where humanity really is at its last dying breaths. We are immediately dropped into a pocket of humans at an army base, just kind of holed up. And in this army base, there's a set of children that are handled in an extreme lockdown manner. And we see this by how they're being handled by the staff of the base. We quickly get to our focal point of a preteen girl named Melanie. And I'm keeping this as a spoiler-free review because I don't feel like there's anything in particular that I need to spoil in order to talk about the things that I do want to discuss about this film. Now, with this setting of an army base, it very much invokes George Romero's The Day of the Dead, and it even continues some of the ideas of Day of the Dead, where in that movie they were experimenting with a zombie that they named Bub. And I would say the second main inspiration to this story would be the PlayStation game The Last of Us, particularly in the lore of the zombies. I would place this as a contemporary to those other works and not so much of a ripoff, though it really holds its own. And largely this is due to the main character Melanie, played by Sania Nanua. Played by Sania Nanua. Probably all of 15 minutes in, you become sympathetic to the world and the reality that Melanie is raised and has to live in. There's also some really good foreshadowing and themes in this beginning part, mainly just having to do with Melanie in particular. Like the way the film brings up Pandora's box, or Schrodinger's cat, which comes into play kind of in a very layered way, not just in a single expression of that as a theme. Sania as Melanie really is one of the better child performances from an actor. And it was just a cool surprise to also see Glenn Close as a core character as well. She plays the Dr. Caroline Caldwell, and at first, when I first watched this, I was thinking this is a case of an actor just trying to get a check in the twilight of their career using their name. And upon seeing the performance, I do not think that's the case at all. She just seemed to recognize this as a great tale and wanted to be a part of it. I even saw like a tiny little bit of some behind the scenes footage, where they interview the actors and stuff, and she seemed genuinely excited to say like, hey, I only read this script once before I decided to be a part of it. And it seemed pretty genuine. You usually don't go too over the top if you're worried about how it's going to look afterwards. Of course, you're always going to be promoting the film. But she really doesn't phone it in. There's 3 to 4 other characters of note that just kind of show how people have dealt with this pandemic since it started. There is a teacher, Helen, who is kind of uncompromising in her beliefs. She doesn't want the pandemic to change who she is as a person, her core. It may be tough, but that's definitely what is the central part of her. And she really works as a great contrast to a character who would, let's say, be the end justifies the means. Helen has more of a moral core to her. You also have Sergeant Eddie, who is a person who's really adapts with the times. And he even probably has one of the bigger arcs in the movie too. So you still get to see him change even more, but you see what he started out as a bit, where he is now, and kind of at the end, some changes. And we'll just round this out with the army grunt Dylan. He's the guy who follows orders, and there's got to be a lot of people like that. Everybody groups together probably during the pandemic, and you have the leaders and you have the followers, and Dylan's just your basic follower. The Girl with All the Gifts also has a great production value. It's technically low budget, but you really don't see that. So for instance, there's some good outside locations shooting at a abandoned city in Russia after the Chernobyl incident. So it's an actual real abandoned city. You're not seeing like a city with CGI shortcuts editing everything or just something that's completely built in a computer. The score also has this cool hauntingness to it that reminds me of the more recent Suspiria remake. It had like that Suspiria remake, I think, had a score by Tom York, and it definitely evoked that same feeling. Now, the film is not without its problems. Most of those problems, I would say, are at the beginning of the third act, and most of those are nitpicks. I will say that as much. One of those things would be, I have a pet peeve in movies where there's, let's say, a fight scene or just some space where there's a big danger and somebody has a weapon to get themselves out of the danger, whether it's a gun, a knife. You know, they're like, hey, I'm going to shoot you, I'm going to stab you if you don't leave me alone. And as soon as they leave the scene, like if they turn a corner, they drop their weapon. When the person at that area is still there, just around the corner, but they drop their weapon immediately. It's a nitpick, but it bugs me. It's a personal peeve. There is, however, a moment where some characters are leaving the home base area of where they're at that's pretty egregious. I wasn't the only person to notice this by far. I watched some older YouTube reviews of this and saw it brought up as well. So that part I know is not just me. And it maybe could have been something that could have been fixed with a line or two. I thought of some possible lines, but it really came across as bad. And I don't know if that was on purpose, if something was edited out, but it feels like that's the way it was supposed to play, and it just played wrong. I don't necessarily like movies spelling out everything, but this was a moment where there needed to be some clarity. But aside from those things that have to do with the beginning of the third act, the ending did land for me, and it also left me with some things to chew on. I like that in a film. Usually, you know, sometimes you just want to turn your brain off, and this one you just have to think just a little bit. Not too bad though. Overall, The Girl with All the Gifts is a good production with a unique enough story to kind of set it apart from the glut of stuff. You're definitely not going to put this in line to Z Nation or something. It is going to be one of the better works out there. The performances stand out, specifically with Melanie, played by Sania, is fantastic. I'm surprised I haven't seen her in more stuff since then. Maybe it was just a fluke. Maybe it was a director who was really good at directing somebody younger in general. But it worked really well. So I'm going to say The Girl with All the Gifts is a real horror show, very suggested. Watch it while everybody's cooped up indoors. Just hit Netflix a day or two before I'm uploading it, so it should be there for probably the next year even. And even though this is a spoiler-free review, don't let spoilers ruin your life. You just might miss some great parts of the journey to that end.